March 7th, 1945, eastern bank of the Rhine River near Remagen, Germany. The metallic groan of tank treads fills the cold morning air as Captain James Harrison of the 9th Armored Division stands at the river's edge, binoculars pressed against his weathered face. Behind him, a column of M4 Sherman's idles, their commanders anxious, their crews silent. Before him stretches the Rhine, ancient, dark, and seemingly impossible. The water moves with deceptive calm, 1,200 feet of liquid barrier between the Allied armies and the heart of Nazi Germany. "Sir, engineering says it can't be done." The voice belongs to Lieutenant Frank Morrison, Harrison's second in command, holding a sodden map that flutters in the March wind. "Current's too strong, banks are too soft. Even if we get pontoons in, they won't hold the weight of armor." Harrison doesn't lower his binoculars. Across the river, through the morning mist, he can see the shattered skyline of German towns, and beyond them, the road to Berlin. Every hour they wait here is another hour for the Wehrmacht to regroup, to fortify, to dig in deeper. General Eisenhower's orders echo in his mind: cross the Rhine, end this war. But the Rhine isn't just any river. It's a natural fortress that has protected Germanic lands since Roman times. Napoleon himself struggled here. Now, in 1945, with most bridges demolished by retreating German forces and the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen collapsed just days ago, the Allied advance sits frozen at Europe's greatest moat. "What about the British bridge?" Harrison asks, still scanning the far bank. "The one they've been talking about." Morrison shifts uncomfortably. "The Bailey Bridge, sir. Engineering Command says it's experimental. Hasn't been tested under combat conditions with this kind of load."
They're saying we should wait for proper pontoon operations. Maybe another week. We don't have a week. Harrison finally lowers his binoculars, his jaws set. "Get me someone who knows about this Bailey system, now." What neither man knows yet is that 200 miles to the rear, in a converted warehouse in Belgium, a shipment of prefabricated steel panels sits waiting, each piece weighing just 600 pounds, light enough for 6 men to carry, yet strong enough to support a 40-ton tank. They're the products of a quiet British civil engineer named Donald Bailey, a man who sketched his revolutionary design on the back of an envelope in 1940, never imagining it would become the key to crossing Hitler's last natural defense. The pieces are already moving forward. By nightfall, American combat engineers from the 291st and 51st Engineer Combat Battalions will arrive at this exact spot, their trucks loaded with what looks like an enormous construction toy. Panels, pins, transoms, and stringers that fit together without rivets, without welding, without the heavy equipment that would take weeks to position under enemy fire. They've been told it's impossible. The river is too wide. The current is too strong. The German 88s on the eastern hills are too accurate. But what they don't know, what they can't know yet, is that in 48 hours, they will prove that sometimes the impossible just needs the right tool and men desperate enough to use it. Harrison watches another Sherman rumble up behind him, its commander's face young and pale, 19, maybe 20 years old. Too young to remember when crossing a river meant months of preparation, when armies stopped at water and waited for spring. But this is 1945, and everything is about to change.
March 8th, 1945, 060 hours, Allied Engineering Depot, 12 miles west of the Rhine. Major Robert Condor of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion stands in the pre-dawn darkness, watching his men unload truck after truck of steel panels that gleam dully under the convoy lights. Each panel is identical, 10 feet long, 5 feet wide, a lattice of welded steel that weighs exactly 570 pounds. To the untrained eye, they look like sections of industrial shelving. To Condor, they represent something far more significant, the physical embodiment of one man's obsession with simplicity. "How many panels do we have?" Condor asks Sergeant William Tucker, who's checking manifests with a flashlight clenched between his teeth. 470 panels, sir, plus transoms, stringers, end posts, and enough pins to build 3 spans. Tucker spits out the flashlight, catching it expertly. But sir, with all respect, have any of us actually built one of these before? It's the question that's been gnawing at every engineer since they received their orders. The Bailey Bridge exists mostly in technical manuals and training films. A few have been constructed in England, in peaceful fields with unlimited time and no enemy fire. But here, under German artillery, spanning a river that has devoured every previous attempt? Condor reaches into his jacket and pulls out a creased photograph. It shows a mild-looking man in civilian clothes, standing beside a small-scale bridge model in what appears to be a basement workshop. Donald Coleman Bailey, civil servant, grade 3, British Ministry of Supply, a man who spent his evenings tinkering with bridge designs while German bombs fell on London. This guy, Condor says, showing Tucker the photo, designed this whole system to be built by average soldiers with basic tools. No cranes, no welding, no specialized equipment. Everything pins together. He tested it in his garage. Tucker studies the photograph skeptically. His garage, sir? His garage. Condor pockets the photo. The British tested the full-scale prototype in 1941. Took a platoon 6 hours to build a 100-foot span. Then they drove a tank across it. Then another. Then a whole column. He pauses, watching his men wrestle panels off the trucks. Bailey designed it so that 3 panels could be bolted together side by side for extra strength, or you could stack them in 2 layers, or 3, whatever the situation demanded. What Condor doesn't mention, what he's trying not to think about, is that Donald Bailey designed his bridge to be repairable under fire. Damaged sections could be unbolted and replaced in minutes. It was a bridge that expected to be shot at, that anticipated chaos, that understood war doesn't wait for perfect conditions. At 06:45 hours, Captain Harrison arrives from the riverbank, his jeep spraying mud as it slides to a stop. He climbs out, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night studying engineering diagrams by flashlight. Major Condor, I'm told you're the man who can get us across that river. Condor snaps a salute. Sir, we'll get you across, but I need your word on something. Name it. Once we start building, we don't stop. Not for artillery, not for air raids, not for anything. Condor's voice is steady but urgent. The German observers can see the river. The moment they realize we're bridging, they'll throw everything at us. Our only advantage is speed. Harrison doesn't hesitate. You'll have infantry cover, anti-aircraft batteries, smoke screens of the weather holds, whatever you need. What I need, sir, is 48 hours and men who won't quit when the shells start falling. The 2 officers stand in the growing light, surrounded by stacks of British steel and American soldiers who don't yet know they're about to attempt something that military engineers have called suicide. Behind them, the Rhine flows on, indifferent to human ambition. Condor turns to his assembled platoons, 150 men, most barely old enough to vote, staring at the mountain of unfamiliar equipment. All right, listen up. His voice cuts through the morning chill. Today we're going to learn how to build a Bailey Bridge. Tomorrow we build it for real. And by this time Saturday, we're going to drive American armor into Germany on a bridge the Germans said we couldn't build. Somewhere in the ranks, a private mutters, if we don't get killed first. Condor pretends not to hear. March 8th, 1945. 1400 hours. Training ground 2 miles from the Rhine crossing site. The afternoon sun breaks through the overcast as Sergeant Tucker drops a steel panel onto the frozen ground with a deliberate clang that makes half the assembled engineers flinch. Beside him, spread across a muddy field that will serve as their classroom, lies a disassembled Bailey Bridge, hundreds of components that must somehow transform into a structure capable of supporting 70 tons. This is a panel, Tucker announces, his voice carrying the particular authority of a man who spent the entire night reading technical manuals. See these holes? He points to the precisely machined openings along the panel's edges. Everything connects through these. No welding, no rivets, just pins and bolts. Private Eddie Chen from Sacramento raises his hand. Sarge, how do we lift these things? They gotta weigh half a ton. 570, Tucker corrects. And you don't lift them alone. Everything about this system is designed for teams. 6 men per panel in transport, 4 men for positioning. Watch. He signals, and a team demonstrates. 3 men on each side, lifting in unison, walking the panel forward like pallbearers carrying something sacred. It's awkward at first, but after the 3rd attempt, they find a rhythm. The metal groans, but doesn't bend. Major Condor watches from a wooden platform rigged as an observation post, his eyes moving between the training field and his watch. Every minute matters. Intelligence reports German reinforcements moving toward the Rhine. Every hour they spend practicing is another hour the enemy has to prepare. Show them the connection, Condor calls down. Tucker and his team position 2 panels end to end, then produce what looks like an oversized bolt, a steel pin with a tapered point. This is what Donald Bailey figured out, Tucker explains, sliding the pin through the aligned holes of both panels. Gravity and load pressure hold everything together. The heavier the weight, the tighter the connection. He hammers a locking pin through the assembly. Next panel. By 1600 hours, they've assembled a 30-foot section lying flat on the ground. It looks impossibly fragile, a skeletal structure of triangulated steel, more air than metal. Lieutenant Morrison crouches beside it, running his hand along a weld seam. This is supposed to hold a Sherman? Not alone, Condor replies, climbing down from his platform. We'll build a double-double configuration, 2 panels wide, 2 panels high. That gives us a load capacity of 70 tons, more than enough for our heaviest armor. And if German artillery hits it? Condor doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he walks to the end of the assembled section and kicks one of the panels hard enough to make it ring. Then we unbolt the damaged section, drop it in the river, and slide in a replacement. 10 minutes maximum. Bailey designed it to be wounded and keep fighting. As the light begins to fail, Condor gathers his platoons around the skeletal bridge section. Beyond the training field, they can hear the distant rumble of artillery. German guns testing ranges, Allied batteries responding. The war hasn't paused for their education. All right, here's how tomorrow works, Condor begins, his breath visible in the cooling air. We start building at 0600 hours. The bridge launches from the west bank and cantilevers out over the water. As we add panels at the rear, the bridge pushes itself forward. No boats needed until we reach the far bank. What about the current? Someone asks from the back. We'll have anchoring cables and luck. Condor lets that sink in. The Germans will shell us, that's guaranteed. When they do, you don't run, you don't hide, you keep building. Because every panel we add is 1 panel closer to victory, and every minute we waste is another American who dies waiting to cross. He pauses, looking at the young faces around him. Farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, immigrant sons from New York. Men who joined to fight, not to build. Donald Bailey never fired a shot in this war, Condor continues quietly. But if we pull this off, his bridge will do more damage to the Wehrmacht than 1,000 bombing raids. Questions? Silence. The kind that carries weight. Good. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we make history. March 9th, 1945. 0600 hours. West bank of the Rhine. Crossing Site Bravo. The darkness before dawn carries sounds that will haunt these men for the rest of their lives. The metallic scrape of panels being positioned, the rhythmic hammering of pins, the whispered curses when cold fingers fumble bolts. Major Condor stands at the river's edge, where yesterday there was only mud and desperation. Now there's the beginning of something impossible. The first section of Bailey Bridge extends 20 feet from the bank, cantilevered over black water like an accusatory finger pointing at Germany. Beneath it, engineers work by shielded lamplight, bolting transoms and stringers that will support the wooden deck. Above, infantrymen from the 78th Division crouch in hastily dug positions, their rifles trained on the far shore, where German observers certainly wait. Panel up! Sergeant Tucker's voice cuts through the pre-dawn. 6 men lift, moving in the synchronized shuffle they practiced yesterday. The panel slots into position, 4 pins driven home. 30 seconds. They're getting faster. Captain Harrison watches from his command post, a commandeered farmhouse 300 yards back. His radio operator monitors 3 frequencies simultaneously: engineering reports, infantry positions, and most critically, artillery spotters scanning for German muzzle flashes. "Sir, bridge is extending at roughly 6 feet per minute," Lieutenant Morrison reports, his eyes on the growing structure. "At this rate, we'll reach the far bank by 1800 hours. "If the Germans let us," Harrison mutters. The eastern hills remain ominously quiet, too quiet. Every instinct tells him the Wehrmacht is watching, waiting, calculating the perfect moment to strike. At 0647 hours, the sun breaks the horizon, and hell arrives with it. The first German shell screams in like a freight train derailed from the sky, impacting 50 yards north of the bridge in a fountain of frozen earth and river water. Before the debris settles, 2 more follow, closer, bracketing the construction site. The Wehrmacht artillery observers have found their range. "Keep building!" Condor's roar cuts through the explosions. "Do not stop!" Private Chen and his team freeze for 1 eternal second as a shell explodes 30 feet away, close enough that they feel the pressure wave in their chests. Then training overrides terror. They lift the next panel. Move forward. Position. Pin. The bridge grows another 10 feet. Smoke rounds begin landing between the bridge and the German positions, American artillery creating a gray curtain to blind enemy observers. But smoke is a temporary mercy. The German guns fire blindly into the cloud, and blind fire at this range is still lethal. At 0720 hours, a shell hits the bridge directly. The explosion tears through the forward section, shearing through 2 panels and sending twisted steel into the Rhine. Men die for cover. The bridge shudders, groans, and for one terrible moment seems ready to collapse entirely into the current. "Damage report!" Condor is already running toward the impact site, Tucker beside him. "2 panels destroyed, sir. End post bent." A corporal's face is bleeding from shrapnel, but his hands are already loosening bolts. "We can replace them." This is the moment Donald Bailey designed for, sitting in his basement workshop in Southmead, England, sketching by candlelight while bombers droned overhead. He knew bridges would be damaged. He knew repairs needed to be faster than destruction. Within 8 minutes, the damaged panels are unbolted and kicked into the river. Fresh sections slide into place, pins driven home. The bridge reaches forward again, hungry for the far bank. The German artillery shifts strategy at 8 a.m. hours. Instead of targeting the bridge, they begin dropping rounds into the assembly area, where panels wait their turn. A direct hit on a supply truck sends steel fragments spinning through the air like deadly confetti. 3 engineers go down. Medics drag them to cover while their squad mates grab the panels they were supposed to carry. No one stops building. By 0900 hours, the bridge extends 200 feet over the Rhine, its double-stacked panels creating a lattice shadow on the dark water below. Infantry companies begin moving equipment forward, preparing for the moment when the bridge reaches the eastern bank, and they'll have to storm across under fire. Condor stands mid-span, feeling the structure flex slightly under his weight. Not weakness, but designed flexibility that absorbs stress instead of shattering under it. Below him, the Rhine flows on, indifferent. Above him, shells continue to fall. He looks back at the western bank, where American soldiers work like demons possessed, and forward toward Germany, where the bridge must reach. 48 hours, he'd promised. They're 12 hours in, and they're only 1/6 of the way across. March 9th, 1945, 1430 hours. Mid-span construction point. The bridge now reaches 600 feet across the Rhine. Halfway to salvation, halfway to suicide. Sergeant Tucker crouches on the forward platform, his hands shaking not from fear, but from 14 hours of continuous physical labor. Around him, men move with the mechanical precision of assembly line workers, except this factory floor is suspended over a river and under enemy fire. Panel up. Another lift, another shuffle forward. The routine has become almost hypnotic. Lift, walk, position, pin, repeat. They've done it 240 times since dawn. Each panel is identical, each movement the same, but exhaustion makes every repetition harder than the last. Private Chen drops a pin and watches in horror as it rolls toward the edge. Without thinking, he lunges, catching it before it disappears into the Rhine. Tucker grabs his belt, hauling him back from the brink. Careful, Chen. We need you breathing. Sorry, Sarge. Chen's hands won't stop trembling. Just how much longer? Tucker looks toward the eastern bank, still 600 feet away, where German machine gun positions are clearly visible through the thinning smoke. Another 12 hours, maybe 15. The German shelling has evolved into something almost predictable. A barrage every 30 minutes, 5 rounds rapid fire, then silence while they adjust aim. The American counter-battery fire tries to suppress them, but the German guns are dug into concrete bunkers built in 1936 when Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland. They're not going anywhere. At 15-12 hours, disaster strikes from a different direction. A Focke-Wulf 190 screams out of the cloud cover, having slipped past the Allied fighter screen. Its 20mm cannons tear along the bridge's length, sparking off steel panels and shredding wooden decking. Men throw themselves flat, pressing against the skeletal structure as rounds punch through the air where they stood seconds before. The plane makes one pass and vanishes into the clouds before American anti-aircraft can respond. It's enough. 3 engineers are wounded. One panel is so damaged it needs replacement. 15 minutes of work destroyed in 15 seconds. Back to it. Connor appears at Tucker's elbow, his uniform torn and his face blackened with smoke. We don't have time for breaks. Sir, the men are dead on their feet. We've been at this for 16 hours straight. And we'll be at it for another 16 if that's what it takes. Connor's voice cracks with exhaustion and something harder, desperation masked as determination. Every minute we delay, the Germans get stronger. Fresh divisions are moving to the Rhine. If we don't get across now, we might not get another chance. Tucker knows he's right. Intelligence reports are grim. German panzer reserves repositioning, defensive lines hardening. This bridge isn't just about crossing a river. It's about maintaining momentum, keeping the Wehrmacht off balance, ending the war before it devours another 100,000 lives. At 1600 hours, they reach the 3-quarter mark. The bridge stretches 900 feet across the Rhine, close enough that they can see individual German soldiers moving in the trenches on the eastern bank, close enough that those soldiers can see them. Captain Harrison makes a decision that will either save or doom them all. He orders infantry forward onto the bridge, not just engineers now, but riflemen, machine gunners, and mortar teams. They'll finish building under cover of American firepower directed at the German positions 300 feet ahead. The eastern bank explodes in gunfire. American .30 caliber machine guns hammer German positions, while mortars drop smoke rounds to screen the final approach. German MG-42s answer back, their distinctive buzzsaw sound cutting through the chaos. Tracers arc across the narrowing gap like malevolent fireflies. And through it all, the engineers keep building. Panel up, walk forward, position, pin. The bridge reaches 1,000 feet, then 1,050. At 1,100 feet, they're close enough to the eastern bank that German potato masher grenades start landing among them. American infantry return fire at point-blank range, shooting at targets they can almost touch. 50 feet! Morrison shouts above the gunfire. We're 50 feet from touchdown! The final panels go into place under the heaviest fire of the entire operation. German troops realize this is their last chance to stop the bridge. American troops realize they're too close to fail now. For 10 minutes, the eastern bank becomes a concentrated hell of muzzle flashes, explosions, and screaming metal. At 1742 hours on March 9th, 1945, the forward edge of the Bailey Bridge makes contact with German soil. We're across! Tucker's voice breaks with emotion. Sweet Jesus, we're across! But there's no time for celebration. Engineers immediately begin anchoring the far end, while infantry pour across, establishing a defensive perimeter. German artillery, realizing they failed to stop the bridge, begins walking rounds up the eastern bank, trying to destroy the beachhead before it solidifies. Major Condor stands at mid-span, watching American soldiers stream past him toward Germany. 36 hours, not 48. They beat their own timeline by 12 hours because stopping wasn't an option and failure wasn't acceptable. The bridge sways slightly under the weight of men and equipment, but it holds. Donald Bailey's garage workshop design, assembled under fire by exhausted soldiers who refuse to quit, has just changed the course of the war. March 10th, 1945. 800 hours. The completed Bailey Bridge, Rhine River. The morning sun reveals what darkness and smoke obscured, a slender thread of British steel stretching 1,200 feet across the Rhine, connecting two worlds that were separated by war just 48 hours ago. Captain Harrison stands at the western approach, watching history roll past him on steel treads. The first Sherman tank approaches the bridge cautiously, its commander half out of the turret, eyeing the narrow span with obvious skepticism. The bridge is barely 12 feet wide, just inches of clearance on either side for a vehicle weighing 33 tons. Behind the Sherman, a column of armor stretches back 2 miles. M4s, M26 Pershings, tank destroyers, half-tracks, and supply trucks. The entire 9th Armored Division waiting to cross into Germany. "Think it'll hold, sir?" Lieutenant Morrison asks, standing beside Harrison. "We're about to find out." The Sherman's engine revs. It lurches forward onto the bridge. Every engineer who built this structure holds their breath. The bridge flexes. Bailey's designed give, absorbing the weight, but holds firm. The tank advances slowly, its treads grinding on the wooden decking laid over steel stringers. 10 feet, 20, 50. At mid-span, the Sherman pauses. The commander looks down at the Rhine flowing 30 feet below, then at the skeletal steel structure supporting 33 tons of American armor, and does something that will appear in a dozen photographs. He salutes. Not to a person, but to the bridge itself. To the engineers who built it. To Donald Bailey, who designed it in a basement workshop 5 years ago. The Sherman completes its crossing. A cheer erupts from both banks. Then the next tank starts across, and the next. By 10,000 hours, American armor is flowing across the Bailey Bridge in a continuous stream, each vehicle adding to the staggering load the structure carries without complaint. Engineers monitor stress points, ready to make repairs, but the bridge performs exactly as designed. Major Condor walks the span at 1,100 hours, conducting a post-construction inspection that's really just an excuse to process what they've accomplished. He pauses at the point where German artillery scored a direct hit yesterday, running his hand over the replaced panels, no different from the originals. Interchangeable parts assembled by soldiers with basic tools. "Brilliant," he murmurs. "You brilliant bastard, Bailey." By afternoon, infantry divisions begin crossing on foot, thousands of soldiers marching across the Rhine, while German prisoners are marched in the opposite direction. The symmetry isn't lost on anyone. This river that protected Germany for centuries, that stopped Roman legions and French armies, has been bridged in 2 days by men who were told it was impossible. Sergeant Tucker finds Private Chen sitting at the western approach, too exhausted to celebrate. "How you holding up, Jen?" "Sarge, did we really do that? Did we really build a bridge across the Rhine in 2 days?" Tucker looks at the steady stream of armor and troops flowing east. "Yeah, kid, we really did that." "My old man's gonna flip when he hears. He's a carpenter in Sacramento, builds houses. He's gonna want to know every detail." "Tell him," Tucker pauses, searching for words adequate to the moment. "Tell him we built it one panel at a time. Tell him when we got hit, we fixed it and kept going. Tell him the impossible just takes a little longer." March 15th, 1945, 1 week after completion. The Bailey Bridge across the Rhine has carried 4,000 vehicles and 40,000 troops into Germany. German engineers, examining it after capture, call it a masterpiece of military improvisation. Field Marshal Montgomery will later say it was worth its weight in gold. Donald Bailey, still a civil servant grade 3 at the British Ministry of Supply, receives word that his bridge design has changed the course of the war. He responds with characteristic British understatement, "I'm pleased it's proving useful." In reality, over 490 Bailey bridges will be built during the final months of the war in Europe. They'll cross the Rhine in 7 different locations, span gorges in Italy, replace destroyed infrastructure across France. The design Bailey sketched on an envelope in 1940 will become so successful that bridges of his design are still in use today, 80 years later, on 5 continents. But none will matter quite as much as this one. The bridge that shouldn't have been possible, built by exhausted American engineers under fire, proving that sometimes the answer to impossible is simply watch us. Captain Harrison crosses the bridge one final time before his unit moves deeper into Germany. He stops at mid-span, looking down at the Rhine, remembering the desperation of standing on the western bank just days ago. The river looks smaller now, conquered, just another obstacle overcome by men who refuse to accept limitations. Behind him, another tank rumbles across Donald Bailey's impossible dream, now made steel-hard reality. The bridge holds,